we were still on a break with Haitian music, and many people were already reacting here in the chat. I think we're sharing the YouTube channel here of that particular piece, but also know that in the Academy we play music as a standard operating procedure, and actually we issue playlists. So after in the chat you will find the playlist of the Surge Academy that was collected over many sessions from many different countries that UNDP represents. So we make sure that our academies are fun, and that actually we learn a thing or two, maybe beyond sustainable development, crisis response. We have to know what are the top hits from the countries that we work with, right? And maybe I will get to Ukraine, I'll give you a tip, but that will be later on. I'm just waiting for 10 o'clock here to strike in Manhattan, and I think this is 10 o'clock. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the third hour of the launch of the Crisis Academy. Why you're asking the third hour, what is this a long event? But in fact, we have not been bored for a second, right? So far, we have had 2 hours of deep going presentations into the 6 academies of the 6 branches of the academy. Can I have the next slide, please? Where in fact we've played games, we earned some more tokens also on the go, and we have enjoyed the discussions. Can I have the next slide, please? That was round 1, round 2, and now the ceremony. I'm pleased to report that we started with 2,000 professional on the line. I mean, by now we have 500 in the room, which is a considerable number, but also we know that people will watch this after we are done. Our launch is more about getting a perspective on the whole academy, and we're so glad that Achim as well as Asako are in the room to enlighten us on that, to stimulate and to inspire us around that. First, though, I mean, Achim, you fell off the screen. You're there, right? Just making sure. If you say a word, that will help just to bring you up on my screen. Anybody has seen Achim? Has he?
I'm here. I was waiting for your central control to unmute me, but I'm here now, Janthomas. Hello there.
Oh, no, great to see you. No, I just want to make sure because you know when you talk, you pop up on the screen. Otherwise, you fall down. So right. First, we want to look at the little video, then play a little game, and go to Asako and to Achim, and at the end, we'll have our ribbon cutting ceremony. And I'm not sure, this could be the first one in UNDP, a ribbon cutting ceremony on Zoom. So video, please.
We're living in a world shaped by crisis. Rising violent conflict, climate change, deepening mistrust in institutions, and the sharpest drop in human development in decades. This challenge can feel too much to tackle. Sometimes, great need inspires great innovation. And we believe the expertise needed to create a safer, more generative world is all around us. Crisis Academy strengthens UNDP's potential to deliver strategic solutions in the face of crisis. To break the cycle, get ahead of the crisis curve, and invest in hope. Through learning, digital campuses, and strategic action, we are powering a system of collective intelligence to ensure UNDP's vision for the future of development becomes a reality, even when conflicts, disasters, and shocks threaten progress. Thematic learning paths prepare UNDP professionals to bring crisis-fluent perspectives to their work and energizes us to act through crisis deployments, collaborative projects, and co-created solutions to complex problems.
That was our short appetizer on the Crisis Academy. Let me give me 5 minutes to tell you what we've done today. We did those 3 rounds, and we were talking about the Crisis Academy, deepening our knowledge and understanding about the 6 branches of the Academy. Can I have the next slide? The Surge Academy, the Data Hub, talking about digital and data in crisis. The Nexus Academy, of course, I mean, very importantly, actually, these are 2 academies, right? One is run with all the partners on the Nexus, and we call that multi-stakeholder, because in the Nexus, we're not alone, right? But also there is a UNDP Nexus Academy, because also for UNDP, our programming, our position, extremely important that we have the people who know how we play the game in the Nexus, right? Then the Infrastructure Academy. A large part of UNDP's delivery actually takes place in infrastructure, and engineers, architects are in many crisis office, but very often they're not brought together, right? It's a great academy because we find it's a different type of people, right? These are more hardware-oriented people, but certainly very important for crisis delivery. Then the Prevention Academy, that is building on the theme of the Secretary General, that doing prevention obviously is far more efficient for anybody. I mean, it's actually why the UN came into place in the first place, right? To prevent crisis rather than to clear up the rubble afterwards. And the Stabilization Academy, very much Africa oriented, of course, in the Sahel, where we have great examples of stabilization, an art in itself. Those are the 6 academies of this moment, the 6 parts of the Crisis Academy, and each one of them follows a similar path, although they are very different. Training and learning, we provide training courses, very collaborative and co-creation, but it's training for a week or 2, sometimes couple of weeks, couple of hours every day. Then the people who are trained come into the community, into the campus, and stay there. It's a team space where we enjoy each other's company, where we call each other, where we share the news, where we distribute some tips, but also where we can ask a question, right? Where is the terms of reference for the procurement expert that we need in Ukraine right now? Can we have that quickly, please? And then you have an answer within minutes. And then thirdly, strategic action, because we're not just learning for fun, right? We're learning to actually branch out into this development world, this crisis world, and to assist our colleagues, but certainly our crisis country governments in for them to pursue these mandates. And that's where we come in action. So training, community, and action are the 3 tracks of every single academy. Next slide, please. A lot of learning being done, very high regards for the learning because we evaluate every opportunity. Over 200 opportunities created and almost 3,000 people engaged within UNDP, but partially also outside UNDP. And that is growing with the day. You see a few testimonies on the screen that I'm not going to read, but particularly the amazing part is amazing, right? I mean, people find, despite the fact that all of this takes place in a virtual world over Zoom, people find this amazing. It is not as if we have to be in a hotel with 30 people and spend DSA in order to learn something, right? And also not to feel the community. We can do this also in this post-COVID virtual world. Next slide, please. And this is a slide that I like a lot, the year calendar of the Crisis Academy. And soon we will be issuing the 2023 one where you can take your pick, right? There is always something going on in your field of interest. And in fact, and I'll tell that later, there is some expansion plans as well, because why would we stick with 6 branches, 6 campuses of the Academy? There is even more to learn. Next. Coming soon, as I said, essentials, short online courses, right? You don't have to join a campus to spend a lot of time there. Maybe in 3 hours, you can get the basics on infrastructure, on Nexus, on stabilization. And from there, you can see if you want to spend more time on it, right? So these essentials are getting in place. 3 of them we already have, but we're aiming to have 6 by the end of the year. Then electives. I mean, this crisis academy can also do the cross-cutting issues, right? Talking about communications across board, across all these academies, gender, adaptive management, ethics, and more. We have already many examples of that. Human-centered communications is currently ongoing between the different academies, and it's having a lot of, they're having a lot of fun there, and we're making a lot of progress. Then we're looking at a crisis academy for all in 2023, increasingly opening up our campuses to people of other agencies, of other communities, of NGOs and UN agencies. And the Nexus Academy is leading the way, because one of the two Nexus Academies is really full of people from other agencies. UNDP leading, UNDP setting it up, at the same time leading the way for the rest of the world. Next. And this one we did specially for you, Achim. We'll give it to you in a print. We took the strategic plan and we ticked our boxes, because these different themes, and this also goes for our new crisis offer that we'll talk about. We picked our themes and we ticked the boxes, because many of the highlights of our strategic plan, poverty and equality, governance, resilience, environment, energy, are ticked in some of these academies, right? And finally, the last column is the Nexus Academy, where we go way beyond, because that is ticking boxes for the UN system, for DAC, OECD partners. Next. With that in hand, we kick off our discussion, and ladies and gentlemen, have your fingers on the chat here. We kick off our discussion on the Crisis Academy with a three-word crossword puzzle. This is how it works. We ask the question, it comes on the screen, you type in the chat, what is your answer? The first one having the right answer will get more tokens. Now, we cannot follow those tokens in this session, so that will be done later on, but we certainly make a full printout of the chat, putting our noses in the right direction here. What is the first question that we want to answer? One across. Gain knowledge, skills, and attitudes to be better prepared for crisis scenarios. It's not surge.
Kevin Schmidt was the first one to get the correct word into the chat.
And the correct word is? Learn. The first track of the Crisis Academy. Second, bring together, build and nurture a community for real-time support and problem solving. It's not so easy sometimes. Bring together a community. Polixenia, did I see connect?
Pavle, I think Pavle was the first one to put connect into the chat.
Connect, the second pillar of the academies, of all academies, because we're sticking together after we learn. We form a community. And then the third one, consciously apply learning through regular work and deployments to create change. A short word. Yes, you got it. Act.
This was too easy. Colleagues got the word before we even put the definition there.
Learn, connect, and act, the three tracks of every academy. Asako, may I open the floor with you? If you say a word, you will pop up. There you are. Thank you, Asako. Asako, with those 6 academies in mind, suppose you had a day to spare, which I know you don't have, but suppose you had a day to spare. Which one would you like to spend in the community? Which academy attracts you most?
You know what, Janthomas, I spent last 2 hours hopping around all academies, enjoying all of them. So it's hard to pick. But anyhow, I'm so encouraged to get all this participation, more than 500, continuously participating. And then from the statistics, I'm so thrilled to hear that the more participations are from external the institutions. I heard the 40-60 split and 60% from external. So warm welcome to all participated. Janthomas, can I go into my remarks or you want to?
Please. I mean, we
question?
would like you to reflect a little bit on the Crisis Academy, particularly, of course, in view of the crisis offer that the Crisis Bureau and yourself have just issued. How important is the Crisis Academy in your vision?
Thank you. And then again, Achim, thank you for participating in this ceremony. This Crisis Academy is so important, but it also stems from our strategic plan to make serious contribution to organizational culture that embraces complexity, actively manages risk, and continually adapt, especially in complex political contexts. This is what the ambition that we set in the strategic plan, and the recently launched crisis offer is to unpack this in a more, in a way that will engage us in a more impactful way with partners. Today's crisis context is really worrying the backslide of the SDGs, and then also all the figures that should be going upward is going downward, and what we do with this multi-dimensional risks and complexity. That's the challenge that we have put ourselves. And recently, launched the new crisis offer is to reimagine how we approach the conflict and crisis. Namely, we recognize that today's crisis is more the development emergency that requires integrated development solutions. And then this development is the only lasting solution to crisis and best means to prevent it. So this recognition had set us to work around the countries to break the cycle of crisis, break the cycle of the fragility, go ahead of the crisis curve, and then invest in home from jobs to justice. Thank you, Achim, for your guidance to come to this new framing. But this is not for the UNDP alone. UNDP teams, this will guide definitely UNDP teams at all levels, but we want to do this with partners. And then we are thinking of a way to work more closely with partners from the UN and beyond, and Crisis Academy's ambition to open up to externals. These are exactly coming from this recognition. And then I would like to reflect a bit further on the 6 campuses that Janthomas had just highlighted. Actually, this came from our needs, demands from the field. We wanted to create the enhanced readiness of the country level leadership and practitioners to deal with the complexity of this high risk crisis context. And then all that came from the need. The Surge Academy is the oldest of all. It has been established in 2020, but built on the Surge induction workshop held since 2006. And this has been the central tools to equip our UNDP staff to respond to crisis work and deployment and crisis programming, operations and coordination. But this has made us aware that, this scheme, that the 3-prong approach that Janthomas has highlighted would work. We had come to recognition that while learning the technical expertise is not enough, we need to form a community that can work in teams, complement each other in a diverse perspective and with the diverse partners, So this peer learning and networking thing came up as a crucial component to our work in crisis. And this has been really linked to action part, namely deployment. So the Crisis Academy, well, the Surge Academy has actually brought up the ready-made practitioners who can be deployed only after a few weeks of the training. We were made all those Surge possible, and there's hundreds of colleagues already supporting the Surge planning, and then also the work implementation in the field. So this built around this Surge Academy model, we came up with a number of things, but I would like to emphasize a little bit even deeper on the each one of them. Nexus Academy is from the beginning a system-wide partnership intent with the OECD DAC recommendations coming into play, and then all the adherents. Build the courses together with all the partners around, with the UN agencies, NGOs, the member states. So this is really the kind of the partnership that we can build around in every context on the crisis and conflict. Data Hub is, you might think that this is technical, but it's not. Actually, this was formed when we needed the massive scale up at the time of COVID in social economic impact assessment to prepare ourselves system-wide, that how we can respond. And then this has become the sources for the UN's work, UN response to COVID, because we figured out that we need a massive data collections and analytic capacities. So this data hub actually fosters the hundreds of the colleagues to be able to scale up this socio-economic impact assessment for the response. The Stabilization Academy is stemmed out of the need actually from the Sahel Stabilization Facility. We found out that we are lacking the practitioners who can operate in this difficult context. And then with the support of Germany and all the regional institutions as well, we quickly formed the cohort of people that they can work in Sahel context. We are now amplifying it to the other cases as well. Community infrastructure, this sounds, well, it might not as if it is a part of the whole crisis response for UNDP, but as a matter of fact, the massive reconstruction needs for the community infrastructure is a part of our typical the recovery, the facility that we will employ, work, cash for work, how we manage the debris collections, but build the destroyed infrastructure is the first thing we do. But with the recognition that we need to connect to the not only the short-term response, but to the longer-term recovery with the green and just transition into play, we wanted to do far better. But this is really the area we need to massively expand as we do things like in Afghanistan and Ukraine and so forth. Last but not least, the prevention narrative needs to change. We need to really change gears for prevention, and for that we need really field practitioners who can work on all of this aspect. And then this is now tailor-made, region by region, context by context, and it will be at the heart of the prevention at scale, in action with partners. So all in all, I mean, these 6 campuses have played the very important role thus far. Moving on, in 2023, we intend to add 3 more, maybe work around the political complexity, adaptive management for crisis, and so forth. So stay tuned. We will push forward with the capacity needed in the field. So I spoke long, but just to conclude that this is a robust, people-centered approach in learning and system, and we look forward to working across all partners moving on. Thank you. Over back to you, Janthomas.
Thank you so much, Asako, to allude even to every single academy and how that figures in UNDP's crisis offer. Achim, before we go to you, we will have a quick crossword puzzle where actually we're picking up words that could be coming from your mouth. I'm sure they will come from your mouth. They come from a strategic plan, but sometimes they are a little bit difficult to guess. Ladies and gentlemen, fingered on the chat. The first one is crisis ready to leverage opportunities for recovery and development with speed. I think we have a winner already. Polixenia, did I see Agile? Yes, Agile came across. We will tell you later exactly who it was because that one was still a little bit easy. The second one.
There's a bit of, maybe we can ask Arilda to stop sharing and share again because the process is a bit rigged. We can see the answers on the other slide.
Oh, Arilda, don't show the
Arilda
answers.
will stop sharing.
Stop the sharing.
Stop the sharing and share again. We want to make it easy for our participants, but not too easy, right? Everybody should know the 3 words already without the crossword puzzle. We know where UNDP is looking at, right? Innovative is definitely one of them, but Arilda will share the screen again and we'll go to the next word.
I think, there we go, there it's gone. All right, the second one, develop and apply new and creative solutions to persistent and emerging risks. That was innovative indeed. But the third one, that's I think is the most difficult one. Approaches led by people and for people to spark and sustain momentum for change. I don't see them yet. Yeah, that was the one with a little dot dash, people-centered, right? People-centered approaches by people and for people. Achim, just to kick it off, do you have a favorite academy you think if you had half a day to spare with to spend with the crowd here, which one would you go to?
That's not a fair question to start with, Janthomas, but good morning, good afternoon to all of you. I love them all because I think they are all building blocks of what you have launched today, which is an academy from many different angles. So I think to pick one would be difficult. Perhaps the one that has the least dates on your timetable yet also shows that it's perhaps one of the newest, the stabilization one. But I think all of them have great merit. So, I mean, first of all, congratulations. I think drawing this together on a platform, on an open platform like this. And by the way, I love the fact that the QR code behind you actually works. I put my cell phone to it and went straight to your Academy Hall. So congratulations on that as well. This is Future Smart UNDP at work.
From the hall, you can get to all the spaces and you can earn the points actually, even after this event. There's still points to be earned by roaming around the academy. Achim, 9 out of 10 UNDP country offices are operating in crisis. How important is it to you that our staff is crisis fluent or crisis prepared?
Well, perhaps to clarify a little bit the statistic, 9 of our 10 largest country operations are in crisis contexts. And I think, let me begin first of all with that word crisis, because there's been a lot of debate, as you know, as all of our colleagues online know, how do we describe places in which, let's say, what we would consider to be a desirable normal, something that's more in equilibrium, ceases to exist. I saw a Search Pakistan team online. What Pakistan has just gone through with the floods is an extraordinary moment in a country's history. It's a crisis. what we're witnessing again this morning, this afternoon in Ukraine, with bombs raining down on Kyiv and Lviv and so on. And I could go on. I mean, unfortunately, we are living in a time where things that should be normal, peace, the opportunity to pursue development, the ability to, look after your children, send them to school, have access to healthcare, all of this ceases to function properly and sometimes implodes entirely and completely when a country finds itself in crisis, whether through a natural disaster, whether through civil strife. I'm thinking also of the drought in the Horn of Africa right now. And I think as a development organization, we chose in a sense this term of crisis because we deliberately want to contrast what should be normality in inverted commas by depicting actually this notion that things are not normal when countries are in crisis. And crisis means everything comes under stress: the institutions, people, the social networks, the capacity to actually sustain one's own choices and survival. And so let me begin by saying that, in our world of technocratic languages, sometimes it's just useful to speak plainly. A crisis is an existential crisis. It can be a natural disaster crisis. It can be a civil war. But what we have focused on as a development organization is how do we pivot the work that we would normally do into a context where things are not functioning as they should be, as people would wish them to be. And I think the 6 academies are in part an expression of that. First of all, I want to begin with the Nexus Academy because, in our international community, in the United Nations, across public and non-governmental organizations, we have developed these political tracks, the humanitarian tracks, and the development tracks. And I think in many ways they have a rationale, but they have also sometimes become a stumbling block. So first of all, I very much welcome that the Crisis Academy puts this notion forward that we have to work in, first of all, synchronicity, in close collaboration, and not just to coordinate with one another, but to co-design, to correspond, to co-support each other, because the strength that different elements of these responses to crisis bring are, present in many institutions, but we do have distinct strengths, comparative advantages. And even the approach with which we engage a humanitarian response is fundamentally different in the way that it is designed, triggered, and then rolled out to, for example, a development program. So let me therefore recognize that, we can debate nomenclature a lot, but really what we are aiming for in the way that we, I think, have tried to mature our own thinking around crisis and development is that we need to connect, first of all. We need to be very specific to a country or a context in which you work. And we need to also, and this has been one of the challenging debates, maintain this notion that because a country enters into crisis, development does not seem or cease to be relevant. People still have to survive. Institutions have to function. I think one of the very insightful understandings early on in the context of the Ukraine, for example, was that in significant parts of the country, there was a functional government. So could we quickly pivot to actually ensuring that that government, the institutions of government at national level, at local level, the social safety nets could actually be supported to continue to function? Digital is playing an increasingly important role in helping countries to maintain a degree of governance and government functionality also. And I think we have a lot of lessons to learn here. And I noticed in this wonderful table that you showed us that you said you will send us a hard copy, the relevance between the strategic plan and the crisis academies. It was striking to me that if I saw it correctly, only one of those had digital at the moment. And I think this is perhaps something we also need to acknowledge, that we are learning every day new ways of doing things in crisis context, and that actually technology can sometimes be a remarkable enabler, even in crisis context. But colleagues, another thing that I think is so critical in the way that Janthomas and Asako, you also laid out the academy, and that is that it essentially represents a way in which we can, first of all, draw on one another's experience and expertise far more quickly. Why do we have to reinvent how to write the terms of reference for, a surge capacity deployment or a procurement action every time? Now, We have something to learn from our humanitarian colleagues. They work with far more templates. On the other hand, in some of the things we do, they are very context and community specific. So again, the ability to adapt the tools that we have developed over years, I think are extremely important, to be able to draw on colleagues who have gone into sometimes some of the most extreme working contexts we can imagine, and have learned not only how to operate there, but also how to stay sane, frankly. I think this is perhaps something that the Academy should not underestimate, that in all of the 6 academies, we should also, have elements, as you probably already do, that address directly also the surge teams, our colleagues who have to sometimes confront the most extraordinary, traumatizing sites and experiences when you enter into a civil war zone or after an earthquake. Their ability to, in a sense, be both strong and resilient, while at the same time acknowledging we're all human beings. This is part also of building a cadre of colleagues and people who do not get burnt out after a while. And in that sense, I think that's an element in the Academy that I think we could also make sure that it is always understood to be integral. But I was referring to digital math just now, just as one illustration, a continuous learning process. And I think part of the future smart UNDP is also reflected in the way that you have designed the Academy. Because you said at the beginning, it's train, it's community, it's action, or training, community, action, I think, and there are different terms that you use. But one of the things that I think we have all begun to appreciate far more is that continuous learning is also essential not only to an institution's ability to evolve, but also to the staff members, our greatest asset. The people who we employ essentially make up what we offer to the world. And so the Academy, in its new orientation, but also with its virtual courses, with a bespoke design that you can pick and choose, where you can connect to a community and stay in continuous contact, and then see yourself also once you're on the ground and actually acting, being able to connect backwards. That to me is an illustration of a future smart UNDP, and it's not just UNDP, but that's how we call it, let's say, in our organization, being able to understand that continuous learning, connectivity to others, shortening both the time and the effort needed to be able to connect. These are all immense assets, and nowhere is this more needed and urgent than in a crisis context. Let me also say perhaps a couple of words that have to do with how we link the notion of development to prevention. Asako, you were already alluding to it in some ways. Our mission as a development organization, indeed our mission as the United Nations, as the Charter itself spells out, is centered around the notion of prevention. And I personally have always believed that helping countries to advance in developmental terms, working alongside them and being able to articulate how out of sometimes very difficult realities, whether it's poverty, whether it's perhaps an economic crisis, we are seeing a debt crisis right now driving many countries to the point where they may default, unable to pay interest rates, and then all the kind of things happen to a country that, in a sense, we built up the Bretton Woods institutions and the UN to, in a sense, minimize that risk. And we know that we are failing in a growing number of countries. So development is always not synonymous, but certainly has a great deal of overlap with this notion of prevention. Now, sometimes, obviously, that does not prevent disasters from happening, particularly natural disasters, civil strife, economic implosion. And I think it is so crucial that, in a way, we never forget that the way out of a crisis, ultimately, and to prevent it from becoming even worse or to becoming a long-term crisis, is to invest in the ability of people to take the reins of development back in their hands. Sometimes in Afghanistan, that means literally focusing on the grassroots, helping people to see how they can survive by focusing on strengthening their ability to earn a livelihood, to reach them when governments are unable to reach them. We have similar realities in parts of the Sahel region today, where essentially government, in terms of fundamental services, be it governance, the rule of law, education, health, is virtually absent from literally hundreds of millions of people's lives. How do you begin to reinsert into that a sense of hope that begins sometimes with reestablishing a marketplace, maybe having a local court, having a teacher in the school again, and slowly helping a community to regain its own confidence. And let me make a last remark that I think I've been also struck by many of our colleagues in the humanitarian community who are also reflecting on this. And it's a debate that, you know, is as true for the humanitarian responses as it is for our daily development work. How do we, in all the extreme circumstances that we deploy ourselves into, and I use that term very deliberately, we deploy ourselves into a reality where people are sometimes at the worst possible moment that they could have ever imagined to find themselves in. As individuals, as families, as a community, how do we preserve this notion of dignity and agency also? You know, crises are a very disempowering phenomenon. And I think one of the things we perhaps underestimate is that as we step up to support people, communities, nations, having a very clear understanding of what it is to recognize that dignity and agency are two fundamental variables in recreating that sense of hope. Because ultimately, none of us from the outside can lift an entire nation out of crisis. We can mitigate it, we can perhaps prevent people from dying in the sense of having access to medicines or to some emergency food supplies. But the way out of a crisis begins with people themselves rediscovering a degree of hope. Then the support that comes from the outside can strengthen that. It can reinforce the ability of communities to organize themselves, to be able to reestablish a basic local governance. And I hope that as the academies evolve, these two, I mean, you can call them many different things. I call it dignity and agency. I mean, there are better ways perhaps to call it, should be an integral part of the DNA with which we design virtually every intervention we undertake. And I think here, hopefully as a development organization, working alongside the political and the humanitarian responses, we can bring a great deal of experience, because I think the journey of development cooperation, support, even in emergency contexts, has taught us a lot of lessons, sometimes too slowly, but certainly powerfully over time, of how we should actually understand our own engagement and thereby optimize its impact. So Janthomas, let me stop here and just say again my congratulations to all those who first of all designed the Academy, but then to the thousands who make up the knowledge, the content, the connectivity of the Academy, because they are the ones who ultimately will not only give life to this idea, but will keep it alive. And I'm very proud to join you today on this launch. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Achim. Very inspiring indeed. I see applause. Don't hesitate, ladies, and I see hearts even. That is great. And indeed, I mean, picking up on crisis work is development work, right? We will never forget that. We are not humanitarian. We come with different package of solutions, right? The technology as an enabler, that homes in very well, Achim. But also thank you for paying attention to staff, their well-being, because indeed, I mean, as we speak, we have people in the room from Afghanistan, from Ukraine, from Pakistan being in a group, in the conference room even. That is great. But I mean, that is tough work, right? And whether you're a search advisor or going there, but particularly when you home in one of those countries, it's not just your work that upsets you, right? But it's even, you have to look after the basics of life and after your family, right? On top of everything else. Thanks for acknowledging the well-being of staff that we will take to heart also in our academies. And then finally, also on the agency of people and their dignity. Indeed, homing that very well, because technocratic type of solutions are not going to cut it, right? I mean, it is people, and they need to develop their countries, right? They need to collectively move steps forward, and we can only incentivize, right? We can only hold their hand one way or another, but it has to be done by the people in the countries that we serve. So thank you very much, Achim. Now I'm going to something risky because we have few minutes. That I mean, it's a big group of people, but I think we can be disciplined. We have few minutes. Stick up your hand, ladies and gentlemen, and if you have a question to either Achim or Asako, one that is pertinent to our launch event here today. Take that opportunity, anybody. Oh, you're also impressed now. Come on. Yes, Patrick. There you go.
Thank you very much for this wonderful course that is open for many. And thank you very much, Director, for your words, and in particular what you have mentioned on dignity. We are organizing a small global, here in Germany, small global dignity forum in Berlin, end of this month. And there I was posed with a very difficult question by the moderator. He told me, Patrick, you're talking very much conceptual, so many things. In a snapshot, what would you tell your grandmother this is all about? So in that spirit, I think this initiative will remain relevant to the extent it is effectively touching across not only the affected, but also working with and across the affected. I say this because at 58, we stay in our jargons. I used to be a consultant for over 12 years with the UNDP, UNICEF and all, and we have our own jargon. Now in the humanitarian, we have our own jargon. So I think this is just what I wanted to share. Thank you very much, Director, for touching on the word's dignity. Thanks, that's all.
Let's also take Angelica, and then maybe have a quick word back from our panelists. Angelica.
Struggling to unmute, sorry about that, but thank you. I mean, I highly appreciate this, and I wanted to just congratulate UNDP to the work you're doing on behalf of all of us from IOM side. We fully support this, and we think it is important to work as one UN and together with the civil society, of course, and across the humanitarian development peace nexus. So thank you very much for this excellent presentation today and the fun to being with you.
Thank you so much, Angelica. Maybe we can go back to Asako and to Achim just for a few minutes. And maybe one reflection. I mean, we see this range of academies. Now that we have that tool, we know how to bring those people together and in smaller groups to network around those basic questions. I mean, would we also have some ideas on how to go forward? I mean, are there particularly areas also, Achim, where you believe we should get better and they're not part of the academy yet? Asako, you already mentioned work around in politically sensitive areas, right? That could be also an academy, and we could get a curriculum going. Could you highlight that? And after that, Achim, are there particular gaps? Would you advise us where the next academy should go? Asako first.
Thank you, Janthomas, and thank you, colleagues. Maybe Achim might go soon, so just quickly. This journey that now we are going to connect all communities with tools that not just a part of the curriculum itself, but all the activities associated with this. I think from this, we need to get all the engagement with the partners, and then we can make it better together. So co-creation will be a part of the strong feature as it is now, but a stronger feature moving on. Thank you.
And Thomas, just to refer to Patrick's grandmother, I feel tempted just to comment not in the point that you made, Patrick. I fully understand it, but I also think, we often think that our grandmothers may not understand things anymore as fully as perhaps somebody who is 25 or 30 years old. I think the opposite is actually true. And the reason I pick on this example, and I leverage it a little bit now, Patrick will forgive me, is that I think part of the problem that we face today is that in the way we try to mobilize resources and funding, we don't appeal to our grandmother's wisdom. We appeal perhaps to a much more narrow, sometimes more populist view of, okay, I'll help them if they, basically don't come to my country. It's sort of instinct. And let's be honest, a lot of humanitarian funding, a lot of crisis response today is essentially being narrated in the countries that we look to provide, a significant amount of financing by essentially rationalizing a sort of, well, if you do something to keep people there, then they won't come to you. And I think grandmothers generally are much wiser, partly because they've seen, ugly things in life, but they've also seen this extraordinary human capacity for compassion. I think we've lost in part this ability to talk to our publics in the same way that we would wish to, I think, be seen to be talking about people who we are helping, not with, as you have just seen in the last few weeks again, when, African colleagues of mine get very frustrated because when a famine becomes a reality, it's the same images we roll out again. And what we do is we essentially condition people to believe that, okay, we'll give some money right now, they'll take care of them, and then the problem is solved. How many famines have we begged the world to provide emergency relief for, and essentially have not been able to solve the underlying causes of famine? And I was struck, and I'm in a dialogue with Martin Griffiths right now, because he wrote a very interesting interview recently where he said, where is all that climate finance that was supposed to help Somalia? And I was really struck by his comments. I then went back and had a look and asked, well, is UNDP actually doing some work in Somalia with either GEF or GCF financing? And interestingly enough, yes, we are. And if only we had scaled up these efforts, we could not have stopped the drought right now. That is a phenomenon that is already beyond our control. But the difference between a drought occurring and a famine occurring is a perfectly manageable response between the development and humanitarian, between adaptation, between the kind of work that we are trying to do when we go into the rural areas of Somalia and build check dams, try to find ways in which livestock and water supplies can be viewed as part of a crisis mitigation response, etc. So I just want to, in a sense, take the image of our grandmothers and actually say they are far wiser than we often give them credit for. So let's also talk to the public, whether they are grandmothers or others, with the same level of sophistication that we would do when we sit with each other. And that would also be a part of rediscovering the dignity in working alongside our colleagues who are in desperate, or people in desperate situations, asking others for help. Perhaps a final remark, if you allow me. It also has something to do with the budget lines. I think the Academy needs to become also, whether it's through the 6 sub-academies or maybe in a particular event, a place where conversations can take place with those who actually determine how the funding into crisis context is defined, split into, essentially silos. And I don't need to tell anyone who is online here the kind of perverse results this sometimes creates. I know humanitarian funding needs to be distinct. It operates with humanitarian rules, and therefore there are very practical considerations. But in the way that we sometimes actually prevent intelligent, smart co-deployment of these resources is actually an offense to human intelligence, I have to say. And I think we need to talk about this. We need to make this part of a conversation that maybe in the Nexus Academy context, but frankly, it could be in the stabilization discussion, it could be in the search discussions, because part of the problem that we then deal with downstream is created upstream. And this is something that I think we all sense. And, just now Angelica spoke of IOM. I mean, how often do we, end up working in the same crisis context alongside each other? But for some reason, you would think that, funding from one comes from one planet and funding from the other from another planet, and the two shall never meet because it would somehow be considered to be not a smart way of dealing with constituencies. And there are many other colleagues from other UN agencies also online here who live this every day. So let me just end by saying, Janthomas, I'm extremely proud of the fact that we are today coming together in this. I mean, UNDP in that sense is an enabler of this academy, which we first of all, I think, thought of as part of our own future smart way of helping our colleagues to do a better job more effectively But ultimately, I really urge you to view this as an open source platform in which, by the fact that we are a large organization, we can put some of these foundational pieces in place. But such a platform actually thrives the more it is used by NGOs, by colleagues in the UN agencies, and ultimately by making also the people for whom and with whom we work part of the conversation. So maybe in each academy track, I would urge you also to include people with the wisdom, not from the professional side, but from the communities that have been at the receiving end, positive and sometimes negative, of these efforts, because they are part of allowing us to see things with a 360-degree perspective. But again, fantastic. My congratulations. I'm sorry, I see a lot of comments going down the side here, including one, for example, on how do we support staff after a crisis, PTSD. I think my hope is the Academy will provide us with some very important guidance here. And maybe one module that we will need also is maybe under the Surge module or Academy for people who have come back from a Surge operation. It's another way in which we can be very practical and acknowledge that this is part of the reality in which we work. Thank you so much, Jan, Asako. Congratulations to you all, to the teams and everybody who has contributed to this. This is truly a moment to celebrate, and then we get back to work.
Thank you so much, Achim, and you're giving us our marching orders, and we're picking that up as we go. Thanks so much. And also, you're giving us our next word for a future crossword puzzle, right? Compassion, and that is not a word we use a lot in UNDP, right? Again, we are using technocratic language, but that is what it's all about, and employing that effectively on all fronts, including in academies. I mean, that could be key to our effectiveness, right? So thanks for give us the inspiration. Ladies and gentlemen, without any ado, we want to go for our ribbon cutting ceremony. And again, Asako and Achim, I believe you have a proper scissor on your desk. Can we see that? Look at that, those massive scissors. We did not bring the ribbon for you, so that we'll need to do that virtually, but somewhere the reality and the virtual need to meet, right? So that's somewhere in front of you. Keep them in front of you, please, because we're going to cut the ribbon together. Because, ladies and gentlemen, if we all go to the reactions button, yeah. Tick, click, and go to the 3 dots, type scissors, which I was told was spelled like SCI something. SCI is enough. Pick up your pair of scissors.
This
We're
is
getting
the oddest prop I've ever received, I have to say, Janthomas. It's certainly a world first, yeah.
I think we have a first. All right, we're cutting right now. Thank you so much. And we have launched the Crisis Academy. Thank you so much, Achim. Thank you, Asako, for cutting the virtual ribbon on this. We are having pictures of this, of course, so everybody can see what we're doing here. But cutting it with 500 people at the same time represents the spirit of the Crisis Academy. It's inclusive. It brings everybody together in a very collegial and flat manner. And I think we have showcased that today. And thanks so much for Asako and Achim to wholeheartedly participate, right? And we look forward to working with you on that more. The prize for the competition for those who earned the tokens is going to be calculated as we speak, but it will be known in the next town hall meeting, Achim, and we hope that you will be announcing the winner of the prize. The winning prize is actually a short scholarship with the Crisis Academy in New York. And I promised our colleagues here, Achim, that I would ask you, if we have the winner in New York, would you want to spend a cup of coffee with them while we film, so we can reinforce some of the messages that we have in the Crisis Academy? Is that something we can aim for?
Well, absolutely, and it will be a great pleasure. And I hope there will be multiple winners maybe, but very much look forward to it, Jan. Absolutely, and welcome to New York. I hope it won't be in the coldest winter months.
We will make sure that it's on a nice day, but this will give incentive to our colleagues here to dive more into the hall of the Academy, to pick up more points by clicking some of the links, because the movies are around, right? The brochures are around, And that way we can enrich our understanding of the academy, particularly, of course, for you to enroll in future online courses, as well as become a prevention advisor, become a surge advisor, go into the infrastructure academy and be part of our joint communities there. So thank you very much to all. It was a pleasure having you. And thanks particularly to Achim and Asako for gracing the occasion with their big red scissors. Thanks so much. At every academy, when we end, we all open our microphones, right, and say hi to one another. That's a mess, but that's exactly what we want. Please open your microphone. Appreciate Achim and Asako and everybody else around the table.
Hello, everyone.
Bye.
Bye bye.